This podcast is brought to you by
Cherry Mobile values your lifestyle. You are listening to a Self-Motivation Quotidian, a podcast by Gamayot, a TCM314 student of the University of Science and Technology of Southern Philippines, Cagayan de Oro campus.
This podcast is brought to you by
Cherry Mobile values your lifestyle. This podcast is brought to you by Magic Setup. All you need is magic. Hello, my amazing self-motivation friend. It is Gamayot with Self-Motivation Quotidian. Take ownership of your personal development, one tip at a time. Today's Monday positivity is important mindfulness reminder, despite the chaos and uncertainty facing in life, especially now. There's a lot of good happening that we're not focusing on, and that's okay. It's natural to be aware of negativity. But just for a moment, let's bring all awareness of all of the positive. So much is going right in your life. The reason you don't think about some of these things very often just the way it is. But as we know, when something good is taken away, we realize how good we had it, and we've got appreciating it as much as we shouldn't have it. Like a missed call from your mom or dad. That's something you're gonna wish you had someday. Or the sweat and soreness of the toughness workout when you're physically capable in it. Or your health in general, where how you sleep without chronic pain or any difficulty when breathing. These are all things that we may have in our life that we don't think about twice yet, and they deserve more credit. It is important to drive your attention on the small things because it is a cascade of gratitude that compounds and peaks all momentum in your favor. When you train your brain and body to acknowledge more of the good which surrounds you at all moments, it will begin to attract more of it creative and valuable ways. If those things seems that these are going wrong, well, you can overwhelming, like counteract that with all of the examples that how things are going right, and start to build newest self-realizations and understandings that will help you overcome them. So I encourage you to take 30 seconds right now to think about how much is going right for you in life. As small and as simple as they might be, so that you can appreciate those elements before they're gone. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Self-Motivation Quotidian.
This podcast is brought to you by
Cherry Mobile values your lifestyle. This podcast is brought to you by Magic Setup. All you need is magic. Hello, self-motivator. It is Gamayot with Self-Motivation Quotidian. Take ownership of your personal development one tip at a time. What do you think if when I ask a question, where do you want to go in life? Is it a building world-changing business? Raising a family? Pursuing a hobby? What is it for you? No one else can answer that question for you. And you might not even know the answer to yourself, which is totally normal. But ultimately, you can get there if you don't define it. To extend this metaphor, let's just say that where you want to go in life is the physical destination. Now, in pursuit in that life, there are two important factors that keep in mind: your speed and direction. First, your speed determines how fast you're making up ground. It's the rate of progress by which you close the gap and now quickly you move. Then their direction is exactly that when you are moving, it's about where you pointed and route you taking. These two factors work together because going fast doesn't matter if you're not going to the right way. And if you are going to the right way but not fast enough, you may not never get there. It's a chicken or egg kind of situation. My general recommendation is dependent on what you're pursuing. If you're casually searching for your final destination, then less direction and more speed could be helpful to get you to taste more things faster. If you're being more critical and search about destination and being intentional about it, then it makes sense no prioritize your direction before investing in the speed. I hope the idea makes sense, but bottom line is recognize the way that both direction and speed play a role in your life. Everyone's path is their own path, going at their own speed and toward their own destination. It is important to figure out what is uniquely best for you. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Self-Motivation Quotidian.
This podcast is brought to you by
Cherry Mobile values your lifestyle. This podcast is brought to you by Magic Setup. All you need is magic. What's going on, my self-motivation folks? It is Chris Nino Gamayot with Self-Motivation Quotidian. Take ownership of your personal development, one tip at a time. For Positivity Wednesday, let's go back to a quote we all know and trust, but instead of just saying it, let's think about what it really means when we believe it. The quote is, "Everything happens for a reason." The way I see it, life is a string of events. One opportunity or decision or conversation leads to the next, which leads to the next. And it's the only after you've gone so far and look back that you can see how all it went down. Oftentimes, these reflections are triggered by positive events, and when you trace backward, you understand how negative moments were necessary guiding stars on your way to your final destination. When you think of everything happened for a reason, you think of it when trying to understand why something bad happened. In this quote helps to be more mindful and curious about how that thing might be serving you or preparing you or teaching you for the future. Well, that's hard and natural to do because we very much rebiased optimize for short-term outcomes rather than delay gratification. It gives negative events meaning. Rooted in all of this is a belief that at the end of the day, you're going to get where you meant to go. Having faith in that process, in trusting that everything does happen for a reason, holds you accommodate the seeing the things around you from a new perspective, which helps you to lift you and motivate you to get back on the track towards your dream. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Self-Motivation Quotidian.
This podcast is brought to you by
Cherry Mobile values your lifestyle. This podcast is brought to you by Magic Setup. All you need is magic. What's up, my friend? This is Crisnino Gamayot with Self-Motivation Quotidian. Take ownership of your personal development, one tip at a time. Today, I'm gonna say something pretty obvious, but for some reasons, still to this day is not entirely obvious to me, and that may be the same for you. In life, we all come from our own backgrounds, like carry with our own sets of challenges, but also carries its own set of privileges. I think too often we rejected things we didn't have access to, which could truly transform our lives for no good reason. Let's say you have a large inheritance from your family, but you don't want to touch the money because you didn't earn it. Or you are a naturally gifted writer, but you chose to pursue being a speaker because you think it's more valuable, or your uncle has some connections that could really advance your career or project to working on, and you don't want to ask him for a favor. It sounds silly, but it's true. People are afraid to use that their gut, and I think that the fear is generated by the ego. It comes from our need to validate our own worth. So we dismiss opportunities or advantages that we didn't create for ourselves. But you're actually doing yourself a service, because how would you treat someone else you had family money, or had a gift from your writing, or a well-connected uncle? You didn't encourage them to make that a squeeze much value as they can from it. It's not selfish. In fact, it's the opposite, because when you use what you've got, you create more value that can positively affect others. And if there's an opportunities never comes from what you wish, and that value lost, and the world will not be better off because of it. So use what you've got. You have access on it for a reason. Make sure you make most out of it. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Self-Motivation Quotidian.
This podcast is brought to you by
Cherry Mobile values your lifestyle. This podcast is brought to you by Magic Setup. All you need is magic. Hello, self-motivator. This is Gamayot with Self-Motivation Quotidian. Take ownership of your personal development one tip at a time. This one is pretty interesting. You'd probably agreed that in general, people are not very patient. Between the quick fixes, fast hacks, one-day delivery from any online shopping stores, and access to the internet at our fingertips, we don't really need to wait around of the things anymore. But what if I told you that impatience is actually a natural state? Just like other animals, humans evolved to be patient in order to secure our resources that either exist in quantities or required a long time to obtain. So what's happened here? It's not that our nature has changed in any significant way. It's our expectation has changed, and those expectations are being inappropriately applied areas where they shouldn't have influence. And this expectation was created by very technologies I mentioned earlier, as well as a marketing word supposed to that guarantees results immediately. But technology is a man-made intervention. It is unnatural, and therefore, it doesn't work well when dealing with natural processors. To provide a personal example, I started using an affirmation, I am worthy, and it's part of my routine. I expected to feel instant results because that's how the things should are this. But after a week, in 2 and 3, I didn't feel any different. I even felt like I was faking a little bit, but I chose to stay consistent. Then, after 3 months of it, a switch flipped, and basically overnight, I started feeling authentically worthy. I say this demonstrates that when it comes to a natural process of a personal development, things take time. With consistency and have faith on the process, you can succeed in showing up the good qualities of your well-being. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy and learn something good in my podcast. Till next time on Self-Motivation Quotidian.
This podcast is brought to you by
Cherry Mobile values your lifestyle. This podcast is brought to you by Magic Setup. All you need is magic.